Welcome to our video series, Leader Standard Work Tips and Tricks, Episode 2. In the first episode, I reviewed what Leader Standard Work is and sharing numerous tips and tricks about its content. In Episode 2, I will review the process of creating Leader Standard Work that I have found to be most effective. Tips and tricks will be provided drawing on years of struggle with the application of the tool. So let's get started. The process of creating Leader Standard Work should follow the process that should be used to create any standard work. First, the current process should be closely examined. This is done to not just identify the sequence of steps that are performed and the key points necessary to perform them. It is also done to identify possible opportunities for improvement in the process. Perhaps there are wastes embedded in the current process that can be eliminated. Perhaps there are opportunities to apply mistake-proof devices to ensure quality outcomes from the process. After such improvements have been made, then you standardize what remains. As I often say, it is a lot easier to standardize on 10 minutes of work rather than 20. The act of simplifying in itself will help people sustain standard work over time, which is always a challenge. We should apply this same approach to the development of leader standard work. I always have leaders track their time for a week or weeks and to closely reflect on it. There will always be opportunities to improve the leader's current routine. At some point, the leader will then put together their own leader standard work, which represents a plan of action against which the leader's actual activities can be compared. When the actual doesn't match the plan, the leader should again reflect. Additional opportunities for improvement may be identified. At the very least, the gap should trigger a corrective response from the leader in order to return to following the plan. We will now dive more deeply into these 4 steps. As part of tracking the leader's activities for a week or weeks is to record the time spent on particular activities as well as who was involved in each. Very importantly, the leader should make notes of any observations made during performance of each activity, if any. Perhaps the leader noted issues that arose that affected the efficiency or effectiveness of the task. For example, a meeting that the leader attended dragged out due to a lack of application of effective meeting skills. Perhaps a meeting was not as effective as it could be due to the absence of certain individuals or the unavailability of particular information. I also encourage a leader to discuss with others involved in particular activities their thoughts about how well or not well these activities are currently performed. Another important reflection involves looking at the various tasks and to categorize them as running the business or improving the business. Which activities are really just about getting today's schedule of work completed? Which can help to identify opportunities for improvement, solve problems, or improve processes. Once the categorization is complete, the total percentage of time spent on running the business versus improving the business can be calculated. We have some standards with regard to percentage of time a leader should be spending on improving the business. A team member who is producing a product or delivering a service can be expected to spend 5 to 10% of their available time on improving the business. On average, this works out to be about 30 minutes each day or 2.5 hours each week, on average. This figure should not surprise anyone. Team members, after all, add value, which means they are directly involved in producing a product or delivering a service. People in leadership roles will have more time available to improve the business, with more time available for more senior leaders. For example, a plant manager should spend 30 to 50% of their available time on improving the business activities. The leader can compare their current routine against these standards and define their personal gap. These standards can serve as goals or targets that the leader can strive towards over time. Towards this objective of improvement, I have leaders ask 3 questions for each activity they currently perform. Can the activity be eliminated? No one should perform the activity. Sometimes we get lucky and can find tasks that can be eliminated. 2, can the activity be streamlined to be clear without undermining its purpose? 3, can the activity be reassigned to someone else? Of course, that person must have the time and ability to do it. At times, a leader is doing certain activities that should be performed by others. This can happen for several reasons that we will discuss in a moment. Often, these activities represent personal development opportunities for the person taking on the task. We'll explore each of these questions in depth next. The most obvious example of an activity that should be eliminated involves addressing recurring problems. These are a symptom of ineffective problem solving in the past. If the leader, working with others, to really define the problem and its root causes and put real countermeasures in place, perhaps the problem can be prevented from happening in the future. Then valuable time can be saved dealing with it over and over again. I often hear from leaders say, after tracking their time, I spend most of my day firefighting. To which I respond, great. What are the most recurring fires? The ones that you spend the most time on. These will be the focus of your first problem-solving or process improvement efforts. If an activity cannot be eliminated, can it be streamlined so that less time is required to perform it, effectively perform it? We are not talking about taking shortcuts here. Sometimes this can be accomplished by creating standard work for those activities for which there is none currently. As an example, many meetings require more time to conduct than they should. Various communication-related activities can usually be improved through use of effective meeting skills and visual management techniques. Experience has shown that meeting time can be reduced by up to 50%. Who wouldn't want that? Another example is an activity that many leaders perform involving gathering and sharing status-related information. Often, the time required to gather process or project-related information can be reduced by the use of visual management techniques or developing system-generated reports and making them more accessible. Yet another possibility often involves secondary processes, such as time and attendance. Leaders should not be spending a lot of time on time and attendance in this day and age. If they are, it's an indication of some system opportunities for improvement. Now, this next tip may sound a bit odd. Can you plan for unplanned interruptions? Sometimes the answer is yes. First, can you make the unplanned plan? One example of this was a purchasing manager who used to accommodate unscheduled visits from salespeople representing suppliers or potential suppliers. He decided to set aside a specific time each week for such visits. Therefore, what was unplanned now was planned. Another example of this is to identify specific time periods each day for any unplanned work that may have arisen. Most interruptions do not require the leader to immediately stop what he or she is doing to attend to the source of the interruption. Now, the leader may be doing just that currently. Instead, the leader should put it aside and attend to it at a more convenient time. I've seen leaders schedule 1 or 2 time slots each day to deal with such unplanned work. In this way, interruptions are not as disruptive, and the leader is better able to stay with the plan depicted in his or her leader standard work. Another possibility to streamline particular activities is to be sure to perform them in a concentrated way. I have seen leaders schedule quiet time to perform certain activities. This often results in a reduction in the time required to perform them. Next, we will discuss the possibility of reassigning particular tasks to others, perhaps with members of the leader's team or others in the organization. At times, a leader is doing certain activities that should be performed by others. This can happen for several reasons. First, a leader could like doing the activity. Perhaps it was their responsibility prior to assuming their current leadership role. Perhaps they have not adequately developed their team members to perform certain tasks. Old school leaders at times do not develop their folks with the belief that in doing so, it will undermine the leader's value to the organization. Other times, the leader believes it's just easier for me to do it. However, an opportunity to develop people and increase engagement is lost. There are numerous examples of such tasks, often dependent on the leader's role. A production manager actually working in a production area in order to meet the schedule for the day, rather than focusing on improvement of the process to do so. A purchasing manager still processing purchase orders to particular suppliers or for big ticket items, instead of developing team members to do so and then transferring the responsibility. A maintenance manager still actively fixing machines, and so on. Prior to reassigning any activity, it first should be examined for opportunity to improve and streamline the activity. Standardized work should be created for the activity as well. Coupled with proper instruction, this will allow for a smoother transfer of responsibility. Of course, the leader must assure that the person to whom the activity is being transferred has the time to perform it. The result of eliminate, streamline, reassign can be substantial. 45 minutes to 2 hours each day. Who wouldn't want that? Now, this does not happen overnight. It may take 3 to 6 months to free up this time. But with some persistence, it can be achieved. What to do with the freed up time? Perform the various activities that make up the lean management system, improving the business activities, of course. Leader standard work represents a plan against which the leader's actual activities can be compared. More than just a checklist of activities, key points for each activity are noted, and any tools such as forms or even separate standard work for particular activities are all included in leader standard work. It is the playbook for each leader's role. We covered the elements of such a playbook in detail in episode 1. The comparison of plan versus actual is a key concept in lean thinking. You find it as part of many lean concepts and tools. For example, 5S, with its visible standards for workplace organization, using lines, shadow boards, signs, labels, and the like, allow for quick identification when actual conditions no longer match planned conditions. And-on is another example, where team members can escalate non-standard conditions such as safety or quality issues in real time through a prescribed process that triggers a deliberate response. When applying lean concepts to project management environments, project plans are frequently compared to actual progress on a weekly or even daily basis. This allows for a timely response to keep work flowing and customers satisfied. We apply the same concept to standard work and leader standard work. I've seen many leaders make effective use of notes on their leader standard work about specific causes of interruptions. As we mentioned earlier in this episode, such reflection can give rise to possible improvement, even after the initial creation of the leader standard work. As part of reflection, the leader can determine the percentage of time that he or she follow his or her leader standard work. I always suggest this. In the beginning, it is common for leaders to state that they can only follow their respective leader standard work approximately 50% of the time. Often, they state this as a reason why leader standard work won't work for them. I continue to encourage them to really look at the causes of interruption for possible improvement opportunities. Over time, I have seen the percentage of time that the leader can follow their leader standard work rise to 85 to 95%. How high this figure can reach will depend on the actual role. Leaders in very repetitive environments, such as assembly line supervisors, may reach the high end of this range. Other leaders might only reach 85%. In whatever the case, think of a more controlled and predictable work environment. Several of the common benefits of leader standard work that people tell me is that there is less frustration and stress, that leaders feel a greater sense of control over their work environment, and a greater sense of accomplishment. These are important benefits for sure. It is not uncommon for a leader to go through multiple revisions of their leader standard work, as many as 6 or 8 revisions over a 3 to 6 month period of time. The leader has to stick with it during this time in order to realize the benefits I just mentioned. A tip for the leader is to post his or her leader standard work visibly, along with some visual indication that activities are or are not being performed as expected. Experience has shown that a leader is more likely to follow it if it is posted visibly. It is a continual reminder to the leader. Also, some leaders have told me that there is an element of not wanting to disappoint their team members or peers when it is posted visibly as well. An X by a particular activity can also spark a discussion between the leader and his or her manager. This should definitely happen when the leader is having recurring difficulties performing a specific activity. Perhaps some coaching with one's manager will help the situation. That periodic conversation with one's manager has its own benefits. The manager will maintain awareness of the workload of his or her direct reports, which is always good. Greater trust can also form. I always suggest that managers during such coaching sessions follow a similar process as we described in the creation of leader standard work. First, be sure that the current leader standard work has all key activities included. Suggestions can include changing the timing of the activity, perhaps eliminating the activity if it is no longer necessary, perhaps streamlining the activity. It's certainly easier to find 20 minutes instead of 30 minutes to perform a particular activity, but not to the point where the activity is no longer performed properly. I have found when properly done, these coaching sessions are invaluable in maintaining strong dialogue between a manager and their direct reports. That brings episode 2 and our series to a close. Some key points covered include tracking one's existing routine can give rise to various opportunities for improvement. Spending too much time on particular activities or not enough on others often becomes apparent as the leader begins to track his or her current routine. Ask the eliminate, streamline, reassign questions to each activity. These questions will help the leader challenge their current routines and free up valuable time. Comparing plan versus actual can give rise to additional opportunities for improvement. Causes of interruption should be noted and often result in tweaking the leader's standard work so that the leader can follow it more frequently. The key is for the leader to recognize the recurring nature of some disruptions. Last, don't expect 100%. 85 to 95% is typical with regards to the leader's ability to follow the plan. There is often a misunderstanding that a leader will be able to follow his or her leader's standard work 100% of the time. However, there are often special causes that arise that will not allow this to happen and cannot be avoided. The key is to not be too quick to believe that all interruptions are special and therefore nothing can be done about them. Again, this brings the series to a close. I hope that you found the content in this two-part series helpful. Leader standard work can be a valuable tool if it is applied properly. It is particularly helpful to those organizations that are struggling to make the lean management system a regular part of conducting business. It can help provide the discipline necessary until the requisite habits are formed. But it most definitely takes some stick-to-itness to realize the important benefits mentioned in the series. So my final tip is to stay with it. You won't be disappointed. Good luck.